Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sports book born in Vegas. I'm Jamie Eisenberg. That's Heath Cummings. Robert Turbin's with us as always. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Happy early Thanksgiving to you. We're going to cover all the Thanksgiving Day games and the Friday game as well. Got a lot to get to on a very busy Fantasy Football Today. I guess we're looking over here. We didn't see which camera we were on. So, yeah, there we go. So we got a very busy show for you today. We're going to go over some of the news as well. Brian Robinson's practicing for the Commanders. We'll talk about that when we get to roster trends. Who's going to be the quarterback for the Giants? We'll figure that out as well. And Daniel Jones has a new home with the Minnesota Vikings. So, Robert, you played on Thanksgiving with the Cowboys. Just tell us what that experience was like, playing on that, special day. Obviously, the spotlight on the Cowboys, spotlight on all the teams that play on Thanksgiving. What was that experience like for you?
It was very cool. It was an awesome experience. I didn't get to eat the turkey leg after the game. I was looking forward to that. But the preparing and the support at the stadium, I mean, the food and everything like that went into it. It was a good experience.
All right, so let's talk about a few of these games. We'll start with the Bears and the Lions. So just going to cover a couple topics for each team, give you the most important fantasy storylines. And for the Lions, Heath, we got Jameson Williams and Sam LaPorta. A lot of fantasy managers don't really know what to do with these guys. You're starting Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're starting the two running backs, Jared Goff, a borderline starter. But when you look at Jameson Williams and you look at LaPorta, can you trust them taking on this Bears defense, which has been pretty good against opposing passing teams?
Yeah, I'm going to view Jameson Williams as a number 3 wide receiver. He has too much upside to sit if you get to start 3 wide receivers, even when there's nobody on a bye and we have all these options available. On any given play, he has the ability to score double-digit fantasy points. LaPorta's a little bit different story. He only has one game this entire season that Jameson Williams has played that he has more than 4 catches. Very touchdown dependent, very big play dependent. And honestly, it's been kind of strange here lately, but tight end's not been bad. We've had some guys emerge as streaming options, Jonnu Smith for one, that I would much rather start over Sam LaPorta. So I'm more comfortable leaving LaPorta on the bench.
All right, so we'll see how these guys operate taking on this Bears defense. Robert, real quick with the Lions before we move on to the Bears. David Montgomery's got this shoulder injury, expected to play. I don't know if you ever had a shoulder injury or not, but any concern with him just, being a little bit banged up on a short week?
I have had a shoulder injury, AC joint injury. You got to put like a little bubble pad on there under your shoulder pads to help sort of alleviate some of that pain. I'm sure that's what David Montgomery is going to do as well. But I wouldn't be concerned. He'll go through the week, going through rehab and things of that nature. He'll be ready for the game.
He was joking around. It's Jared Goff's press availability on Tuesday, so it seems like he's fine. Sonic and Knuckles should be good to go against that Bears defense. Robert, I'll bring the Bears storyline to you here. So we saw a very much improved passing game for the Bears last week against the Vikings. Caleb Williams looked good. All 3 receivers contributed in some facet. Rome Odunze, 20 targets in his last 2 games. Keenan Allen, 23 targets in his last 2 games. DJ Moore just getting a lot of short area passes. Do you like these 3 guys? Do you like Caleb Williams? Cole Kmet had a big game as well, taking on a very good Lions defense that bends but doesn't break against opposing passing teams.
I do like these 3 guys. Now, I'd like to see it again for another game, the consistency there. But like you mentioned, 20 targets the last 2 games for Rome Odunze. It feels like Caleb Williams is sort of developing a nice chemistry with Keenan Allen now. And I think DJ Moore, he's been there really since week 1, but obviously there's been some inconsistencies. But I do like this group, and I do have confidence in this group moving forward.
It is a big headache as someone who is a fantasy football projector or ranker. It's like it's great for Caleb Williams that he has these 3 guys. For fantasy football purposes, it'd be great if one of them would kind of take a step back. But for now, I'm just viewing them all as number 3 wide receivers. I think in a 2 wide receiver league, you might actually sit them. In a 3 wide receiver league, I would rank them this week, DJ Moore, then Rome Odunze, then Keenan Allen, all somewhere between 24 and 34 in my rankings. I need to see another week from Cole Kmet before I really buy it. So again, he's kind of with Sam LaPorta. I'd rather sit him.
Kmet is facing the number 1 team in fewest fantasy points allowed to opposing tight ends. It's just it is frustrating to figure out really the 2nd and 3rd receiver for Chicago, because DJ Moore you feel the most comfortable with. But in terms of Allen and Odunze, like Pete said, I think we need to see just a little bit more from these guys moving forward. Let's go now to the next game that we have is the Giants and Cowboys, and we have some news here when it comes to the Giants quarterback situation. So Tommy DeVito did not travel with the team to Dallas. They have not ruled him out yet, but it feels like Drew Lock is going to be the starting quarterback. So I'll start with Malik Neighbors, and Robert, I'll start with you. Do you trust Malik Neighbors with Drew Lock, or really doesn't matter who the quarterback is at this point? Because Daniel Jones' Malik Neighbors' numbers with Daniel Jones have clearly started to tail off. Mostly since Andrew Thomas, their left tackle, has gone down. But we didn't see a great game from Tommy DeVito and Neighbors last week. And now you got Drew Lock most likely starting against this Cowboys defense.
Yeah, I view Malik Neighbors as a wide receiver 3 at best at this particular time, especially with what's going on with the quarterback spot and the organization overall. There's no connectivity right now with the football team, so there's a lack of production there. But it's still Malik Neighbors, and he can pop off at any given time, given the opportunity. So I see him as wide receiver 3.
It's a tough thing because you look at the target share and the opportunity and really even the catches, and Malik Neighbors looks like a number 1. He's been a number 3 wide receiver for the last 6 weeks. Adam Aders talked about this a lot. And a big reason why is he scored 0 touchdowns. This Cowboys defense has been better as of late, but we saw it with Terry McLaurin last week. We saw it with Nico Collins on a play that got called back 2 weeks ago. They can still give up a really big play, and Neighbors is the type of player that can still make a big play. I'm not so sure that Drew Lock isn't the best passer on the Giants. I just don't know. So I'm still starting Malik Neighbors.
I think that's the sentiment most fantasy managers will have is you're still starting Malik Neighbors. Clearly, if you have a loaded roster, like I would start Cortland Sutton and Jacoby Myers over Malik Neighbors this week. But you got to be in a really certain situation to have quality receivers. You like their matchups. You like the way they've been playing to bench someone with his talents. Very similar to Tyreek Hill, we'll talk about in a second. But in terms of Tyrone Tracy, Heath, I'll go to you first. Robert, you can follow. 2 bad fumbles the last 2 games. We saw the one in Carolina, costing the game essentially. Another one going in for a touchdown last week really wouldn't have mattered against Tampa Bay, but still costly fumbles. Are we concerned about Tyrone Tracy that maybe Devin Singletary gets his job back or takes a little bit too much work away from Tracy to trust him as this offense is falling apart?
I'm a little bit concerned, but if I wasn't concerned, Tyrone Tracy would be a borderline number 1 running back in this matchup. I would view him as a borderline number 2 this week. He's still somewhere right around RB24. I'd still rather start him than a DeAndre Swift or a Nick Chubb or several other starting running backs. So I'm probably starting Tracy, but not as excited as I was. The problem is, and it's kind of like Neighbors, like Tyrone Tracy has really shown an ability to make big plays as a running back. You could have some serious FOMO if you leave him on your bench.
I would say because of where the Giants are right now as it pertains to their season, Tyrone Tracy is still a trustworthy back to have in your starting lineup. Now, had he been playing for the Philadelphia Eagles or a winning team, his job would have been taken by now because 2 fumbles is just unacceptable for a running back. But I think he's going to get another opportunity to be the guy in the backfield moving forward for the Giants. So I'd put him in my starting lineup.
Let's go to the other side of the field here with the Cowboys, and they're coming off a big win for them, taking on the Commanders. And one guy that stood out in that matchup was Rico Dowdle. We heard 2 weeks ago, Mike McCarthy say that he was going to be the lead running back, the featured running back. Now we're trusting CeeDee Lamb. You might need Luke Schoonmaker. Really, in 2 quarterback leagues, you can go with Cooper Rush, but Rico Dowdle's a little bit of a question mark. So, Robert, when you look at Dowdle taking on a Giants defense that just allowed 3 rushing touchdowns to Bucky Irving, Rashad White, and Sean Tucker, they couldn't stop really anything that the run game Tampa Bay threw at them. Is Rico Dowdle a must-start player on Thanksgiving?
No, he's not. No, he's not a must-start player just because there's been too much inconsistency there. I view him a lot of the way that I view Javonte Williams with the Denver Broncos. You just don't know what you're going to get from him week in and week out. Now, if you have an injury or, you got guys on bye weeks, which obviously we don't have any this week, then he obviously can be in your starting lineup. But if you got other backs, I would go with those guys over Rico Dowdle this week.
I've got Dowdle 1 spot behind Tyrone Tracy, so right in that borderline RB2 range. The thing that scares me, and we talked about this on the podcast this morning, is we know what Ezekiel Elliott does on Thanksgiving. He jumps in the Salvation Army kettle, and so I am worried he's the running back who gets into the end zone for the Cowboys today.
It's new season, new blood. Let Rico Dowdle jump on the kettlebell and be the guy for the Cowboys. I think he's going to have a big game. So I actually like him a lot. I do think he's a must-start running back. All right, let's go now to the night game on Thursday night. It's the Dolphins and the Packers. Really, there's a lot at play here with both of these teams because there's a lot to like and there's also a lot to dislike. So we'll start with the Dolphins and their passing game because Devon Achane's a must-start player at this point. So, Heath, when you look at this, Tua Tagovailoa's record in bad weather, whether it's 50 degrees, 40 degrees, 20 degrees, no matter how you break it down, sub 50 degrees, he just has not been good. 1-7 in his career, I believe, 9 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Taking on a Packers defense that's been very good. You talked about that on our podcast, what they've done to quarterbacks at home. Tyreek Hill obviously feels like a must-start wide receiver. Jaylen Waddle's coming off a huge game. Jonnu Smith is coming off a huge game. Give me your take on the Dolphins passing game.
So I'm starting Achane. I'm starting Jonnu Smith. He's been that short area target. He's actually been number 1 on the Dolphins, in counting the wide receivers, in total targets since Tua Tagovailoa came back from injury. That's been bad for both Tyreek and for Waddle. I'm not starting Tua in cold weather. And you might think, 26 degrees is not that cold. If you live in South Florida, 26 degrees is really cold. And I actually view Tyreek as more of a borderline number 2, high-end number 3. Waddle's a low-end number 3 wide receiver.
All right, so we'll see if the dink and dunk passing game helps them in the cold weather. But I do like Tua's approach. Bring it on. Let's change the narrative. Let's see how he does. Huge game for the Dolphins. Huge game for the Packers as well. And Robert, when you look at that side of the field, Josh Jacobs is a must-start player, but the passing game also some question marks because Jordan Love has not been good. 3 of his last 4 games under 20 fantasy points. They may not have Romeo Doubs in the concussion protocol. Jaden Reed has been disappearing a little bit. Christian Watson had a bad drop last week. How do you view the passing game for the Packers taking on the Dolphins, which has been statistically very good against opposing quarterbacks?
Well, I think with the injury to Romeo Doubs, if he doesn't end up playing, that helps out Jaden Reed. We know that Jaden Reed and Jordan Love have a really nice chemistry with one another. And so I think he may be a high-end wide receiver 3 heading into this week against Miami.
All right, we'll see how Green Bay's passing attack does here. We need to see something from Jaden Reed. We need to see something from Christian Watson. You see 3 targets, the bad drop. If he catches that ball after the 150-yard game 2 games ago, we feel a lot different about Watson. But again, the Dolphins have done really well against opposing passing games of late. I do think Tucker Kraft is interesting, hard to trust because he's touchdown dependent, but without Romeo Doubs there, maybe he does have a big game. And we've seen the Dolphins struggle against tight ends recently. Go back 2 weeks ago to Brock Bowers in the huge game that he had. Austin Hooper scored a touchdown against them last week as well. All right, last game we're going to talk about because we're not going to have a show for Friday. So got the Raiders and the Chiefs squaring off in a big, I guess, for the Chiefs at least, AFC West, and I'm all over the place here. They're going to play in the AFC West. They're going to play each other on Friday. So, Heath, we got the Raiders and a questionable backfield here because Alexander Mattison practiced in a limited capacity on Tuesday. Might be able to return this week. Amir Abdullah's coming off a very strong game against Denver. Any interest in one of the running backs here taking on the best run defense from a fantasy perspective with the Kansas City Chiefs?
If Madison needs another week, then I would view Abdullah as a good flex play. They're not going to have success running the ball against the Chiefs. That's not really what Abdullah has done that much. Only had 7 carries in a game when both White and Madison were out anyway. But I do think he can find some success catching the football. And so I do kind of think that even if Madison's back, I might just like Abdullah as my favorite Raiders running back, but none of them would be in the top 36 at that point.
For the Chiefs, Robert, we're going to find out if Isaiah Pacheco returns, so we'll talk about that on our Fantasy Football Today podcast. You can read about it on CBSSports.com. What we do know, though, for the passing game, Patrick Mahomes is starting to look like Patrick Mahomes again, but there's no consistency from his pass catchers. You're starting Travis Kelce, but Noah Gray's got 4 touchdowns in his last 2 games. DeAndre Hopkins scored a touchdown last week, but he's been mostly a disappointing fantasy asset since joining the team in the trade from Tennessee. Xavier Worthy's had some good moments, some disappointing moments. Please, young man, keep 2 feet in bounds. How do we feel about the Chiefs pass catchers taking on the Raiders?
Yeah, you're starting Travis Kelce, in my opinion. Noah Gray, potentially as a flex player if you need one. But that's how I view DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy as well. Wide receiver 3 type players. And I would even throw Juju Smith-Schuster in there sort of as a maybe, just in case he has an explosive game because he has the ability to be able to do that. But all of these guys right now, wide receiver 3 flex players, in my opinion.
100%.
All right, so we'll see what happens there with the Chiefs, and we'll see what happens there with the Raiders as well. All right, real quick before we take a break, it's Thanksgiving coming up tomorrow. I want to see what these guys like in terms of their food options. So we're going to do a quick game of this or that. So I'm going to give you some food options. You're going to tell me which is your favorite, almost like start, bench, and cut. So here we go. First one, this or that. Mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, or stuffing. Heath, you're up first.
This is not a question. Mashed potatoes and gravy get their one whole plate of it. Absolutely love it.
Robert?
Nah, I got to go with stuffing with the cranberry sauce on top, man, all day, every day.
All right, so 1 stuffing, 1 mashed potatoes. I would go mashed potatoes as well. I got to go a little vegetable option here. So we got green beans, we got cream spinach or carrots, and I took the most popular items here, so I'm not just making this up myself. So, Robert, you go first. You got green beans, you got cream spinach or carrots?
Can you see that? That's Popeye, baby. I'm going with cream spinach all day. Let's go.
I'm pretty sure potatoes are vegetables. Can I just have more mashed potatoes? I just like to have some more mashed. No, I'll take carrots if I have to have one of these 3.
All right, carrots for you. I'll go with the spinach as well. Trying to get to as big as Robert one day in my life. All right, so Robert told you he likes cranberry sauce. He said he likes gravy. Now you got to choose cranberry sauce or gravy. Heath, you're up first.
Yeah, I will say, like, my wife is currently cooking some cranberry sauce that we're going to have tomorrow, and it's the best cranberry sauce in America. If it's her cranberry sauce, I'll take that. But if I've got a plate full of mashed potatoes, I need some gravy to put on those taters.
Well, I need some cranberry sauce sent to my house from Mrs. Cummings then, okay? Because I'm cranberry sauce all the time, every year. Okay, so yeah, I need some of that, Heath. I need some of that.
We might have to have a cranberry sauce cook-off. My wife says I think is the best in America as well. She does some homemade cranberry sauce also. So we might be sending double packages to Robert's house once we're done. All right, last one here. Got to give a little bread option. So biscuit or cornbread? Robert, what do you like better?
I'll go with biscuits. It's more versatile. Put some butter on there. You can do syrup. You can do jelly. I'm going biscuit.
Not really a big bread guy. I'd kind of like to have some more mashed potatoes if I could, please. But I'll take cornbread if I need to.
All right, I'll go cornbread as well. So got a little side dish options for what the guys here like for Thanksgiving. Hopefully your meals will be good. We got more coming up on Fantasy Football today, so stay right here. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I'm Jamie, that's Heath, that's Robert. It's time for the roster trends of the moves that were made on CBSSports.com leagues on Tuesday night, the most added, most dropped, and most traded players. Remember, this is always impactful for what moves you could be making for those of you that have waivers that run on Wednesday. So let's show you the most added list, and probably no surprise that there's going to be a couple running backs on this list, one in particular in Jeremy McNichols, the other being Gus Edwards. So we'll start with the Commanders situation. So McNichols added in a ton of leagues, but Wednesday's practice, bad for Austin Eckler. He's in the concussion protocol, did not practice. Good for Brian Robinson. So Robert, when you look at Robinson returning and Eckler not being there, is adding McNichols a bad move because it feels like there's going to be a little redundancy there between him and Robinson can certainly work in the passing game.
It can be a good move if you feel like McNichols is going to essentially take the third down role and be a huge part of the passing game for the Commanders. But with Brian Robinson being healthy, it is a little, I'm pondering a bit why he's the second most added player around fantasy managers. I don't know if I would take that approach, especially with Brian Robinson seemingly being healthy, but he could be a big part of the third down package heading into Sunday.
So before you jump in, Heath, so I think people are adding it with the assumption that Robinson was not going to play after he left last week. These are the moves that happened on Tuesday night, so that could be why he was adding that capacity. Heath, if Robinson plays and with McNichols there, it's not a good matchup against Tennessee. How do you view these two guys taking on the Titans?
So I updated my projections already to just kind of what happened in week 4 when Austin Eckler missed time. And what we had was about 47% of the team's rush attempts went to Robinson, about a 30% went to McNichols. Robinson had a 10% receiving share. McNichols, I think, had a 3 to 4. That makes Robinson a borderline number 2 running back, but it's an awful matchup. So I wouldn't really want to start either one of the Commanders.
It does help, though, that Robinson, at least last year, was big in the passing game. So we'll see what happens for him in this matchup. That could be where they have some success. But you've seen this Titans defense. Joe Mixon just got shut down. Aaron Jones got shut down recently. They are very good at stopping the run, not so much at stopping the pass. All right, we have Gus Edwards being added, and this is important because J.K. Dobbins could miss multiple weeks with his knee injury that cost him to leave Monday's game against Baltimore. So, Heath, I know you're not a big fan of Gus Edwards, but there's a big opportunity here. And then we also have Kamani Vidal. How do you view the Chargers backfield for this week and then moving forward?
I do not want to start a Chargers running back. Gus Edwards has been one of the worst rushers in the NFL this year. Last in avoid rate, last in yards created, had 18 carries early this season against the Panthers and scored 5.9 fantasy points.
Robert?
It wouldn't surprise me if Kamani Vidal is a guy that you may put in a flex situation here if really needed. The Chargers have been high on him really coming into the season. It's just that J.K. Dobbins is really taking over that starting role. But with him being out and, like he mentioned, Gus Edwards not really being productive, this could be actually a bigger opportunity for Vidal.
I am curious, though, with the matchup against Atlanta, if the Chargers offense shows up, throw to score, run to win, do they give Edwards some chances, certainly by the goal line? So he's going to probably have to score. He's not going to work in the passing game, but he's not a bad add just to see what happens moving forward because this run game has been successful, mostly on the legs of J.K. Dobbins, who's been having a fantastic season. So we hope he's back soon. Certainly hope he's back at 100% for the fantasy playoffs. All right, let's show you the most drop list. Not a lot of impact here for, I think, what fantasy managers are looking at moving forward. A lot of defenses being dropped, a lot of kickers being dropped. Audric Estime, easy to move on from him, knowing that we've seen seen Javonte Williams in and out of the featured role for the Broncos. Last week it was Dylan McLaughlin. Raheem Mostert's fallen to third on the list. Robert, I'll ask you, Cedric Tillman, is it a bad idea to drop him? I know he's had 2 disappointing games in a row, but last week he did suffer a concussion against the Steelers. I'm not sure if he's going to play this week against the Broncos, but are we just moving on from him too soon?
Yeah, if you feel like he's not going to play, maybe it's a good idea to drop him, but I think it's too soon right now. I mean, he was explosive once Jameis Winston became the starting quarterback again. He's had a couple bad games, but I would keep him in my lineup for sure because this offense for the Cleveland Browns is just one of those boomer bust type opportunities for every wide receiver that's a part of that core. So I think it's too soon to drop Tillman at this juncture.
Yeah, I kind of view, when all 3 of these guys are healthy, I kind of view the Browns receivers a lot like the Bears wide receivers. It's like you just got 3 number 3 wide receivers, and any of them could be a top 15 guy in a given week. I would like to hold on to Cedric Tillman if I can.
Yeah, and not a bad idea to pick up Elijah Moore also with the injury to Cedric Tillman. He was available in about 60% of leagues on CBSSports.com. Fantasy leagues. So just keep an eye on this. It's not an easy matchup against Denver. But when Jameis has played well, Elijah Moore has played well. When Jameis has played bad, Moore has played bad. So there's an easy correlation there that Moore is a big part of Jameis Winston's success. All right, we'll show you the most traded list. I know some trade deadlines have passed already. Some are still coming up. This will probably be the last time we show you the most traded list. But some players here that are still on the move. Very interesting situation with the Chiefs running back situation because we could have Isaiah Pacheco returning this week. Robert, I'll ask you this just because we've talked about this a lot. If he does come back this week, we've heard Andy Reid said they'll kind of mix and match both running backs. Would you trust Hunt still with Pacheco back? It's a great matchup against the Raiders.
No, I'd have to move Hunt to my bench if Isaiah Pacheco's coming back into the lineup. I think that he would get the lion's share of the opportunities for the Chiefs in the backfield. And quite frankly, Kareem Hunt just hasn't been all that productive over the last few weeks either. So a big opportunity for Isaiah Pacheco coming back.
And I just kind of think that the Chiefs are wanting to see, like, what does Pacheco look like in a game? Coming back from a broken leg in the same season doesn't happen very often, and this is a team that plans on playing at the end of January, early February. I'd still rather start Hunt than Pacheco this week, but I think they're both flexes.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Maybe just give one more week. Let Isaiah Pacheco get 100%. They have a sort of a mini bye playing on Friday. Get back to week 14 and maybe use Pacheco for the stretch run there. All right, we got one question for you. Remember, we're going to answer a bunch of your questions at the end of the show. Continue to send them to us on social media using hashtag AskFFT. And Terry in the Trenches wants to know, choose one flex in a PPR league. Sam LaPorta, Jacoby Myers, or Xavier Legette. Robert, who's the flex option for you?
I'm going Xavier Legette.
I will go Jacoby Myers.
I'll go Jacoby Myers as well. I do want to see what Legette looks like another week with everybody there, Adam Thielen back, but Jacoby Myers has just been so awesome. I don't think the Chiefs will slow him down, so he would be my favorite of that trio. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We come back. It's time for the running back roundtable. Lots of questionable situations going on in certain backfields. Robert will break it down for us. Heath will give this fantasy spin. That's next on FFT. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. It's time now for our running back roundtable. We'll talk about some situations going on in certain backfields, and can they be solved for fantasy managers? Do we have a problem for certain situations, or are we in a good spot with some of these backfields? And the first one we're going to start with is not a very good one. We thought it would be, but it's Christian McCaffrey. So he's returned now for 3 games, has not scored a touchdown in 3 games. First time that's happened for him since joining the 49ers. And his last 3 games, he's trending in the wrong direction. 16.7 PPR points his first game back in Week 10, 14.6 in Week 11, and 7.8 in Week 12 against the Green Bay Packers. We know there's a lot of injuries right now, Robert, with Brock Purdy. We don't know if he's going to return in Week 13 against Buffalo. You got Trent Williams, who's obviously a big part of the run game, not playing last week against the Packers, their star left tackle. How do we view Christian McCaffrey moving forward? We had this discussion last week on who's the best running back rest of season. I took McCaffrey. I don't feel very comfortable about that right now. So where do we feel about McCaffrey rest of way?
I still think he's an RB1, RB2 type running back. I think he's still a must-start player for fantasy managers moving forward. Yes, the 49ers are dealing with a lot of injuries, and that's part of why Christian McCaffrey his numbers are going in the wrong direction the last few weeks. But he's a guy that can have a big game, at any point this season. And the 49ers, once they get more healthy, you'll get more production from Christian McCaffrey. So I still think he's the RB1, RB2.
Listen, this has been the year of the old running back. James Conner's been better than we expected. Derrick Henry's obviously had a resurgence. Aaron Jones is still good. Saquon Barkley's still like. So I don't want to write Christian McCaffrey off, but I just don't think that he's quite Christian McCaffrey right now. When you watch him run, he doesn't look quite like Christian McCaffrey. I'm ranking him as an RB2, not an RB1 until he proves otherwise.
And I'll go back to something you said last year, Robert, when we had you on one of our shows. With Josh Jacobs with the holdout, it took him a few weeks to get going because he missed preseason, didn't have his legs underneath him. And maybe that's what McCaffrey's dealing with right now, is that he's getting his legs back after not playing for the first 9 weeks of the season with the Achilles injury. So hopefully the best of McCaffrey is yet to come. We did see Jacobs obviously pick up his production after a slow start last year. It takes a little bit of time for these guys, as we know, to get in NFL shape as opposed to just being in shape. Next one, Robert, here. Do we have a Jonathon Taylor problem? Because he has not scored a touchdown since week 8. His last 2 weeks, he's combined for 10.5 PPR points. And that's despite getting 24 carries against the Jets in week 11. So Richardson's been up and down the last couple of weeks at the quarterback spot. Is Taylor safe as a number 1, even number 2 running back, because he's not been involved in the passing game, taking on the Patriots in week 13?
I think he's still an RB2. The problem with the Colts offense right now is that they're putting all of the focus on Anthony Richardson, whereas it should be on Jonathon Taylor. And when the focus is on Jonathon Taylor, he's really productive. Now, I know you mentioned he had the 24 carries, but he's a guy that is accustomed to really bouncing back. And when this offense wants to prioritize getting him involved and having success, he usually does. So I still think he's an RB2.
I remember we made a Tua Tagovailoa problem and a Jaylen Waddle problem. You know what fixed that? Playing against the Patriots. I think facing the Patriots is going to fix Jonathon Taylor as well. I'm starting him this week.
Yeah, and then they get their bye week. Then they close the season with Denver, not easy. Tennessee, not easy. You do get to the fantasy championship, though, in week 17. It's the Giants. So hopefully Jonathon Taylor can lead you to that point and then maybe gives you a big finishing kick. Maybe he needs a little bit of rest, though, with the bye as well. Offensive line needs to get healthy also. All right, Robert, I want to ask you about the Steelers running back situation, because for the most part it's been a solid season for Najee Harris, but a lot of that came when Jaylen Warren was banged up. Now Warren's back. Warren had the better game than Harris in week 12 against the Cleveland Browns. How do we feel about these two guys moving forward against the Bengals in week 13 and then rest of season? Is Warren going to surpass Najee Harris and outperform him like he did in 2023?
No, I don't think so. I don't think Jaylen Warren will surpass Najee Harris, because I think Najee Harris is still going to get the bulk of the opportunities. But Jaylen Warren is one of those players that can just have an explosive player or an explosive moment at any point of a game. It reminds me a lot of Austin Eckler, for the Commanders. But I think that Najee Harris is still the RB2, RB3 sort of must-start player.
So I think you see here the consensus 29-31, Sportsline 27-31. When we don't have anybody on a bye, that's pretty much how I view both these guys. They are high-end flexes. If they score a touchdown, they're going to creep into that RB2 range. If they don't, then they're going to be around RB30. If I don't really want to start them, especially in a week like this where I shouldn't have to.
The thing that I like about Jaylen Warren is 2 of his last 3 games, 12-plus carries. If he's starting to get as many carries as Najee Harris, he's going to be better than Najee Harris. I agree with what Robert said. They still should feed Najee Harris more, give him more carries. He was having a solid season prior to the last couple of weeks, and he did get a little bit banged up in that Browns game. But we know the receptions to start to favor Jaylen Warren moving forward if Russell Wilson throws to his running backs. I like that Harris has had a couple catches as well. But if we see the carries get equal, I do think Jaylen Warren's the better talent, so we'll see if he starts to emerge as the better fantasy option moving forward. Not an easy matchup like you would think against the Bengals. Their run defense has been much better in their last couple of games. All right, last topic here before we take one of your questions. I like to ask a little look ahead. We're going to start to do this a little bit more as the season rolls to an end, looking ahead to 2025. So we have 3 prominent rookie running backs. Before the season, it would have been easy. Jonathan Brooks would have been the guy we're saying is the best rookie running back going into his sophomore season. But these 3 guys, rank them for 2025. Bucky Irving, Tyrone Tracy, and Jonathan Brooks. Robert, you go first.
Bucky Irving is the clear number 1 here, in my opinion. I'd go Jonathan Brooks at 2, Tyrone Tracy coming in last at 3.
I think because of the Chuba Hubbard contract, I'd probably have to put Bucky Irving at 1. I will put Jonathan Brooks at 2. Tracy's the type of guy, and really I guess Irving is too, but Tracy's the type of guy that, especially if there's a coaching change, might just be replaced next year. So he's a distant number 3 for me.
Well, that's an interesting point. I do think Irving is the clear-cut number 1 because Rachaad White, as we know, has struggled each of the last 2 years to run the ball. He's done a great job catching passes, but I do think as we're seeing Bucky Irving to get more work moving forward, certainly love his opportunity this week as they take on the Carolina Panthers. Rachaad White's a great flex. The next two, though, is tough because if Tracy's the featured running back for the Giants, then it's hard not to say he's two, even with a coaching change. So far, they said they're not going to make a coach change because the quarterback play should be better. Offensive line, as we saw at the beginning of the season, was healthy for the Giants. They performed well. Brooks in a secondary role, it's hard to say he's going to be better than Chuba Hubbard. The talent is there, and maybe 2 years removed from the ACL proves it, but man, it's just disappointing to say that he's not number one on this list based on where he was drafted and the opportunity that we thought he had. I hate the Chuba Hubbard contract for Jonathon Brooks. We'll see what happens this offseason as we rank these guys once again. All right, let's answer one of your questions before we take a break here. Thank you again for sending them to us on social media using the hashtag AskFFT. And we got this one here. Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, Nick Chubb, or Gus Edwards without J.K. Dobbins. Which two do you start here, Robert?
Oh, boy, this is tough. Wow. I'd probably go Najee Harris and Nick Chubb. That's what I would do.
Yikes. Full PPR, I would probably go the Steelers. I'd probably just start both Steelers, go Najee and Warren.
I would go both Steelers as well. In non-PPR, maybe Chubb over Warren just with the opportunity that he scores. Did score 2 touchdowns last week, but it's not an easy matchup for him taking on the Denver Broncos. We'll see how this all unfolds. I do hope that Gus Edwards has a strong game, that maybe we could rely on him while J.K. Dobbins is out. All right, we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, it's Start, Bench, Cut. That's next on FFT. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. It's time now for everybody's favorite game. It's Start, Bench, Cut. Who's going to be in their lineup? Who's going to be on their bench? And who are they kicking to the curb in this theoretical game that we play? You're obviously not cutting these guys. They're too good of players, but we're going to do that for the purpose of your viewing pleasure. Let's start with the quarterbacks here. The trio that we got: Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Bo Nix. Heath Cummings, Mahomes, Herbert, Nix. Start, Bench, Cut.
I will start Patrick Mahomes against the Raiders. He has been a top 5 fantasy quarterback since DeAndre Hopkins joined the Chiefs. We don't know who he's going to throw touchdowns to every week. We just know he's going to throw them now. I will bench Bo Nix. He's been, I think, a number 1 quarterback over that same stretch. Just an incredible stretch of play from Nix. And I'm cutting Justin Herbert.
I'm going to start Bo Nix and bench Justin Herbert, and I'm going to cut Patrick Mahomes in this scenario here.
Wow, that's an interesting one. I'm going to start Patrick Mahomes. I'm actually going to sit Justin Herbert because I do like the matchup a little bit better for him taking on the Falcons than I do for Nix taking on the Browns. And I'm going to cut Bo Nix, again, strategically. They got their bye week next week, so if I cut him, I can still pick him up for the fantasy playoffs. Hopefully, he'll still be on waivers at that point. But I love what Mahomes has done lately. Like Keith said, he's just been finally looking like the quarterback that we waited to see all season long, fantasy-wise. And Justin Herbert, I'm going to throw out last week's game against the Ravens. He got a rushing touchdown early in the game. Quentin Johnson couldn't catch anything. 5 targets, 3 drops. That was a miserable performance. Cut into the production for Justin Herbert. Otherwise, I think he would have had another solid outing here. While Bo Nix has been fantastic, I just think the ceiling's a little bit higher for these other guys. I'm surprised, Robert, though, that you're cutting Patrick Mahomes. We might have to get another fake tweet up here so that Mahomes sees that one after you cut your buddy DK Metcalf last week. All right, trio of wide receivers that we have here. We got Cortland Sutton, who's been on fire lately as well, as Bo Nix has played at the level that he's been playing at. Drake London and Garrett Wilson. So, Robert, I'll start with you. Start, bench, cut. Cortland Sutton, Drake London, Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, give me Drake London as my starter, Garrett Wilson on the bench, and I'll cut Cortland Sutton.
Wow, we are just completely opposite today. I am starting Cortland Sutton, a top 10 wide receiver for me. And in fairness, all of these guys are top 15 wide receivers for me, so there's no good choice to cut. I will bench Drake London, and I'm going to cut Garrett Wilson.
I think I'm with you, Heath, just because Sutton has been on such a roll, and the matchup against the Browns has been favorable for number 1 wide receivers. Drake London, he got the Patrick Surtain treatment 2 weeks ago. They're coming off their bye week. I think he's going to be in a much better situation taking on the Chargers. And then in terms of Garrett Wilson, look, he's had a fantastic season, but we have seen all this turmoil with the Jets lately. It's tough to trust. The Seattle defense has been really good lately. They just shut down Marvin Harrison, for example. Not that these two guys are on the same playing level, at least yet. So I do think Garrett Wilson is the riskiest of the trio. But I do love the situation for Cortland Sutton, how he's played. One of the best values for any fantasy leagues that we've seen this season. And Drake London has lived up to the billing. So he's going to be on the bench. Sutton will be the starter for me, and Wilson will get cut. All right, next trio here. And we got some news. Trevor Lawrence looks like he's going to play, so that's going to help one of the guys that we're talking about here at the wide receiver spot, Brian Thomas Jr. But we got Brian Thomas Jr., Marvin Harrison Jr. I couldn't find another junior to make it a junior. But we got Brian Thomas Jr., Marvin Harrison Jr., and Jordan Addison, who's played great the last 2 weeks. So Heath, I'll start with with you. Who's starting, who's sitting, and who's getting cut?
I can't even check my rankings on this one because I've updated the projections for Brian Thomas, but not yet the ranking. I'm actually going to start Brian Thomas Jr. We've got Trevor Lawrence back. We've got Gabe Davis on IR. We've already had Christian Kirk ruled out, and so I do expect a big target share for Thomas. I think he and Lawrence do some good things. I don't want to cut Marvin Harrison Jr., but I will say that he is my lowest ranked this week. It's just the upside with him is too high for me to cut, so I'll put him on the bench, and I'll cut Jordan Addison.
We actually agree. We agree on one thing, finally. Yeah, I'm going to start Brian Thomas Jr. as well. I'm going to put Marvin Harrison on the bench for the same reason. I just think the upside is too large. And I'm going to cut Jordan Addison.
All right, I'm going to disagree on the last two. I'm going to start Brian Thomas Jr., so we're all in agreement there. I'm actually going to bench Jordan Addison. He's been great the last 2 weeks. 8 targets each of the last 2 games. I think he's finally coming into form and being used. That was kind of the biggest thing, was he wasn't being targeted to the level that we were hoping for as a second-year wide receiver, and now we're starting to see that, which is coming at the detriment of Justin Jefferson, so we may get a little bit of a shift moving forward. But Marvin Harrison Jr. just makes me a little bit concerned because we have not seen the targets go his direction. We thought coming off the bye, we'll run some different routes, he'll be more involved. That didn't happen against Seattle. Again, that's a very difficult defense, but he's facing a difficult defense as well this week in Minnesota. So unfortunately, he's going to be the one that I cut. I don't want to, but unfortunately, he's the one that has to go. All right, we got one more group here of start, bench, cut, and that's at the tight end spot. K. Dotton coming off a bad game. Taysom Hill, the last time you saw him, he broke fantasy over 40 PPR points. And TJ Hockenson coming off a strong game. He's had 2 good games of the 4 games that he's played. So, Robert, I'll start with you. Start, bench, cut, K. Dotton, Taysom Hill, TJ Hockenson.
I think you got to start Taysom Hill. I mean, I wouldn't want to, but he's been so good, and I think he's such a big part of this offense. You start Taysom Hill, you bench TJ Hockenson, and I'm cutting K. Dot.
He had a 34% target share, Taysom Hill, and a 24% rush share in their last game. I'm starting him. I'm sitting TJ Hockenson. I'm cutting K. Dotton.
I do think I'm gonna agree. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna agree all the way. I'm gonna agree with starting Taysom Hill. I just think most upside by far of this trio of tight ends. I just don't want to get away from K. Dotton from one bad game. Yes, it was the first game with Mike Evans, but the Giants have been fantastic against opposing tight ends. It's just a weird thing. I don't think their defense is that good. I certainly don't think the back end of their defense is that good, but they don't give up production to that position. They've allowed 1 touchdown to tight ends. I want to see if K. Dotton bounces back in one of the best matchups. They just gave up 2 touchdowns the Panthers did to Noah Gray, so I do think that K. Dotton could still be that Chris Godwin type player for Tampa Bay. I don't want to give up on him just yet. And while Hockenson was great last week, you go back 1 week prior to that, he was terrible. So 2 good games, 2 bad games. So I'm still going to put K. Dotton on the bench, and I'm going to cut TJ Hockenson. Again, I don't want to do that. Love all 3 of these guys, but you got to start Taysom Hill. I mean, let's see if he continues this. They won their last game. Maybe they can steal one again against the Rams in week 13. All right, let's answer one of your questions here, and then when we come back after the break, it's going to be all your questions to close the show. This one, though, is going to be a little bit of a special one. PPR league, Malik Neighbors or Devontae Adams. Heath, we haven't spoken a lot about Devontae Adams, but it's been clearly an up and down scenario for him since joining the Jets. Neighbors clearly up and down. We don't know who's going to play quarterback. Looks like Drew Lock. Who do you like better this week in week 13?
Yeah, I'm not sure whose quarterback I have more concerns about, but I'll go with Malik Neighbors as a starter this week. I do like both of them as top 20 options.
I'll take Devontae Adams this week.
Yeah, it does seem like you're completely out on Malik Neighbors, but I'm going to go with Malik Neighbors as well. I just think much more upside. He should get more targets than Adams if things go right. Hopefully, Drew Lock, we get a little bit of a squeaky wheel game after Malik Neighbors complained about not getting a target in the first half last week against Tampa Bay. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We come back again. It's all your questions next on FFT. Welcome back to our final segment here on Fantasy Football Today. It's all your questions. Let's get right to it, and we are brought to you by BetMGM. Is it crazy that I'm tempted to start Taysom Hill, I'm assuming, over Travis Kelce this week? So, Keith, which tight end do you prefer, Taysom Hill or Travis Kelce? Are we there?
I am not there. I'm going to start Travis Kelce, but it's not crazy even a little bit, especially in non-PPR. It's not even kind of crazy. I might do it.
It's not crazy at all.
I'm still going Travis Kelce.
But I'm still going Kelce.
That's the Raiders. Come on, Kelce, let's go. He's been outscored in the last 2 weeks, 4 touchdowns to the season by Noah Gray. It's just crazy. All right, next question. Start 2 wide receivers in half PPR. Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Deebo Samuel, DeAndre Hopkins, Brian Thomas. So let's see how much you don't like Malik Neighbors. Robert, who are the 2 receivers that you're starting in half PPR? Marvin Harrison, Neighbors, Deebo, Hopkins, Brian Thomas.
Yeah, I'll go Brian Thomas for sure, and I think I'm going to go Marvin Harrison Jr. here as well.
I will go Brian Thomas and Neighbors.
I'll go Brian Thomas and Neighbors as well. It's just amazing that we're not even considering Deebo Samuel at this point. He's just been so disappointing, and we don't know who the quarterback will be in some potentially bad weather in Buffalo. Next question. Alejandro wants to know, need to sit one running back in PPR. Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs, Ken Walker, Bucky Irving. Oh, wow. Who's the odd man out here, Heath?
I do not want to sit any of those guys, but Tony Pollard is the guy I would sit if I had to.
Robert?
Same. Yep, Tony Pollard.
Yeah, it's crazy that we're going Bucky Irving over Tony Pollard, but I would agree. Jacobs too good right now, and Ken Walker's got such a great matchup against the Jets. Next question. Pick 2, half PPR. Calvin Ridley, Jaden Reed, DJ Moore, Marvin Harrison Jr. Who are the two guys that you're starting here, Robert, in half PPR?
I'm going to go Jaden Reed and DJ Moore.
I'm going to go DJ Moore and Calvin Ridley.
I'm going to go DJ Moore and Calvin Ridley also. I do hope that Jaden Reed has a big game, but it's just been so disappointing lately with his lack of production. Next question. Who would you start at flex in PPR? Darnell Mooney, Rome Odunze, Taysom Hill, Christian Watson. And we have not seen an update on Darnell Mooney's injury. I'm sure we will have one today, so check out CBSSports.com. But which of those two guys which would you start at flex, Heath, of those 4 options?
Assuming that Darnell Mooney is okay, I would start Darnell Mooney. And if he's not okay, I'm going to start Rome Odunze.
If Mooney's okay, then I'd go with Mooney. But if not, I'm going with Taysom Hill, actually, in this spot.
I would agree with Robert. It's Mooney or Taysom Hill if we don't have Mooney in there. All right, next one. Would you pick up Justin Herbert or Russell Wilson or just start Jared Goff against the Bears? So, Heath, rank those quarterbacks. Herbert, Wilson, Goff.
I'd go Herbert, Goff, Wilson.
Same for me, yeah. I'd go Herbert, Goff, Wilson.
I do hope Justin Herbert bounces back. Last time we saw the Falcons, they could not stop anything the Broncos wanted to do against them. So hopefully Justin Herbert has a big game and reminds fantasy managers of what he was capable of. All right, that'll do it for us here on Fantasy Football today. I guess just, before we wrap things up here, what's your plans for Thanksgiving? Robert, I'll start with you. What do you have in mind for the big day? How are you going to consume all the football games?
We'll be hanging out with the grandparents, kiddos, and cousins, and the drill. We'll be having a good time, watching some ball and eating a lot of food.
Yeah, I'm heading up to Mom and Dad's, be watching a lot of football, be hoping that Drew Lock throws for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns so we can all laugh about that. Looking forward to it.
It's going to be interesting to see how these games unfold. The first game on CBS, make sure everybody's watching. We'll see if the Bears defense can slow down the Lions, and maybe if just the passing game for Detroit continues to take off. We know the run game is going to be successful there. The night game is the most interesting one to me. I want to see what happens there between the Packers and the Dolphins. And then the Giants-Cowboys game, like you said, Heath, it would be great to see what Drew Lock is capable of doing. Thank you to everybody for watching. Thank you to our great crew for putting on a great show. We'll be back again next week, and we really appreciate everything that you guys do for us. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody. For Heath, for Robert, I'm Jamie. Thanks for watching.
Good luck in your turkey bowls.